The ruthless and the restless Olivia Pierce clutched her portfolio tighter as the elevator climbed toward the 32nd floor. Her reflection in the polished doors showed a woman with determination in her eyes, but her rapid heartbeat betrayed her nerves. After 3 years at boutique design studios, landing an interview at Westfield, advertising was her big break, even if the agency's reputation for ruthlessness matched its prestige. They eat creatives for breakfast, her former colleague had warned. Especially him. Julian Westfield doesn't care how talented you are if you can't handle criticism. The elevator doors slid open to reveal a sleek reception area where everything, from the angular furniture to the strategically placed awards, screamed perfection. A poised receptionist guided her to a conference room where 4 executives waited. The interview progressed smoothly until the door opened mid-presentation. Julian Westfield entered like a storm contained in a tailored suit. Tall, with sharp features and calculating hazel eyes, he assessed her portfolio without introduction. "The Bellamy campaign," he said, voice crisp as autumn air. "Your concept is derivative." Olivia's prepared responses evaporated. "I disagree." The room temperature seemed to drop. The other executives shifted uncomfortably. "You disagree?" Julian's eyebrow arched slightly. "Based on?" "Based on the fact that visual symmetry isn't derivative. It's foundational. The campaign draws from classical composition while incorporating contemporary color psychology." Olivia pulled out another design. "This creates resonance with both traditional and younger demographics. Derivative would be safer. This is intentionally balanced." For 3 excruciating seconds, Julian stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Interesting perspective. We'll be in touch." 2 weeks later, Olivia had a desk at Westfield. Her excitement quickly soured as she discovered Julian's management style included midnight emails, brutal critiques during presentations, and an apparent inability to offer praise. He demanded excellence through fear rather than inspiration. He rejected the entire Hampton proposal, Olivia whispered to Damon, a copywriter who'd become her lunch ally. 3 weeks of work and he dismissed it in 30 seconds. "That's Julian," Damon shrugged, biting into his sandwich. "Last month he fired Teresa from accounts after she questioned his strategy. The man's brilliant but completely detached from human emotion. Word is he hasn't taken a day off in 4 years. Despite the warnings, Olivia threw herself into her work, staying late most evenings. One night, as she revised designs for a difficult client, she noticed Julian watching from his office. When their eyes met, he didn't look away, just assessed her with that same inscrutable expression from her interview. "The typography needs refinement," he said, approaching her desk. "The kerning is inconsistent," Olivia bit back a retort. "I'm aware. I'm correcting it now." "Good." He paused, scanning her other open files. "Your concept for Bennett Hotels. It has potential." Before she could respond, he returned to his office. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Julian would criticize her work, sometimes harshly, but always with precision. Occasionally, he'd drop a comment suggesting he recognized her talent. These rare moments made the criticism somehow harder to bear. Clearly, he saw value in her work, yet chose to focus on flaws. What Olivia didn't know was that Julian kept a file of her best designs, studying them after hours. What she couldn't see was how he defended her concepts to demanding clients. And what she would never have guessed was that the name Pierce had registered with him from the moment he saw her application, though he buried the recognition deep beneath his professional facade. As October rain streaked the office windows one evening, Olivia found herself alone with Julian in the elevator. The silence felt oppressive. "Working late again?" he finally asked. "The rosewood pitch needs refinement." The unspoken accusation, because you rejected the first 3 versions, hung between them. Julian studied her. "Dedication is commendable. Don't burn out." The elevator doors opened. Olivia stepped out, bewildered by what almost sounded like concern. "Miss Pierce," he called after her. "Your persistence. It's not unnoticed." As she walked into the rain, Olivia wondered if that was the closest thing to praise Julian Westfield could offer, and why, despite everything, it felt strangely significant. Walls of Glass, the annual Westfield advertising retreat, arrived with all the subtlety of a hurricane. 60 employees shipped off to a secluded mountain resort for 3 days of team building and creative rejuvenation, corporate euphemisms that translated to awkward trust exercises and forced socialization. Olivia packed minimally, planning to avoid the optional activities. Her strategy: contribute meaningfully to required sessions, then disappear with her sketchbook. What she hadn't planned for was being assigned to Julian Westfield's innovation team. "This can't be right," she muttered, staring at the group assignments posted in the lodge's grand foyer. Damon appeared beside her, coffee in hand. "Oh, it's right. And it gets better. We're developing concepts for Luminous Technologies. Word is, if Julian likes what we produce, it becomes the agency's official pitch next month." Luminous Technologies, the cutting-edge firm revolutionizing sustainable energy storage, was the client every agency in the country wanted. Their campaign would be career-defining. Wonderful, Olivia sighed. 3 days of Julian dismantling every idea before it's fully formed. The innovation team met in a glass-walled conference room overlooking the mountains. Julian arrived last, dressed more casually than Olivia had ever seen him. Dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that softened his usual sharp edges. "Luminous Technologies doesn't want another sterile tech campaign," he began without preamble. "They want emotional resonance without sacrificing intellectual integrity. We have 3 days to conceptualize something revolutionary." What followed was unexpected. Rather than dictating direction, Julian posed questions. Rather than immediately critiquing, he listened. When Olivia suggested an approach centered around intimate human moments illuminated by the company's technology, Julian actually nodded. "Develop that," he said. "Pearson Ashford, work on visual concepts. Chen and Rivera, messaging framework. Present initial thoughts at dinner." Paired with Damon, Olivia spent the afternoon sketching in a quiet corner of the lodge. Around sunset, she ventured outside to photograph the golden light filtering through trees, visual inspiration for the luminosity concept. As she framed a shot of light refracting through morning dew, she spotted Julian standing alone on the observation deck, staring at the horizon. Something in his solitary posture made her pause. Without the office surroundings, without the power dynamics, he looked almost vulnerable. He must have sensed her presence because he turned suddenly, their eyes meeting across the distance. For a moment, neither moved. Then, surprising herself, Olivia walked toward him. "It's beautiful up here," she said, stopping beside him at the railing. Julian nodded. "I come to these mountains sometimes. When the office feels too confining." "You? Take time off? I thought that was against your religion." The words slipped out before she could filter them. To her shock, Julian's mouth curved into something resembling a smile. "Contrary to office mythology, I do occasionally leave my desk." A comfortable silence settled between them as they watched the sun sink lower. Then Julian spoke, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Your illumination concept. It reminded me of something my grandfather used to say about his work as a photographer. We don't create the light, we just reveal what's already there." Olivia studied his profile, catching a glimpse of something genuine beneath his careful composure. "Was he the one who inspired you to go into visual communications?" Julian looked surprised by her perception. "Yes, though my father had other plans. Investment banking, preferably. But you chose advertising instead. I chose creative strategy. My father considered it a compromise." He turned to face her. "Your portfolio. Before you joined Westfield, the community mural project in Riverdale. What inspired that?" The question caught Olivia off guard. That project had been a labor of love, documenting a neighborhood arts initiative that had transformed abandoned buildings into community spaces. It had paid nothing but meant everything. "I grew up there," she admitted. "When the arts program started, it changed everything for kids like me. Suddenly, we had somewhere to go, something to aspire to." She hesitated. "It's why your criticism sometimes, it's not just work to me. Design changes how people see things, how they see themselves." Something shifted in Julian's expression. Recognition, perhaps. The moment stretched between them, unexpectedly intimate. "We should get back," he finally said. Dinner presentation. That evening, as their team shared initial concepts, Julian was still direct but noticeably less cutting. When Olivia presented her visual approach, human moments captured in natural light, with subtle integration of luminous technology's distinctive illumination, Julian studied the mock-ups with unusual intensity. "The perspective here," he said, pointing to a sketch showing a child reading by the glow of a luminous lamp during a power outage. "It captures something essential. Develop this further." Later, as the mandatory team dinner dissolved into smaller social groups, Olivia found herself watching Julian navigate conversations with practiced ease. His social charm was clearly a skill he could deploy when needed, yet something about it seemed performative compared to their moment on the observation deck. As if feeling her gaze, he looked up, meeting her eyes across the room. For a heartbeat, the mask slipped, and she saw again that flicker of genuine connection. That night, unable to sleep, Olivia worked in the lodge's common area, refining her concepts. Footsteps made her look up to find Julian approaching with 2 mugs. "Coffee," he said, setting one beside her. "Though at this hour it's probably irresponsible." "Thanks." She watched him settle into an adjacent chair with his own sketches. "You don't have to keep me company. I'm not. This chair has the best lighting." But the slight curve of his mouth suggested something closer to humor than dismissal. They worked in comfortable silence for nearly an hour, the space between them gradually filling with something that wasn't quite friendship, but no longer resembled antagonism. "Why did you hire me?" Olivia finally asked. "At the interview, you called my work derivative." Julian set down his pen. "I called one campaign derivative. Then you defended your choices with conviction and intelligence." He met her eyes. "Talent is common. Talent with backbone is rare." By the retreat's final day, something fundamental had shifted. Their team's concept for Luminous was selected for development, with Olivia's illumination framework at its center. As they boarded the bus back to the city, Julian paused beside her seat. "Good work this weekend, Pierce." Simple words, but from Julian Westfield, they felt monumental. The Secret in the Archives November brought freezing rain and the Luminous Technologies deadline. Olivia found herself working closely with Julian, their post-retreat dynamic evolving into something resembling mutual respect. He was still demanding, still exacting, but now tempered with moments of unexpected consideration. Coffee appearing on her desk during late nights, genuine questions about her design process. "The archive files you requested?" "Miss Pierce." Olivia looked up to see an intern depositing a dusty box beside her desk. For the Luminous pitch, she'd requested access to Westfield's historical campaigns, searching for precedents on sustainability messaging. "Perfect. Thanks." The archive was a treasure trove of vintage advertising brilliance. Olivia lost herself in decades of campaigns, admiring how styles had evolved while fundamental principles remained. Near the bottom, she discovered a folder labeled Community Initiatives, 2010-2015. Curiosity piqued. She opened it to find documentation of Westfield's pro bono projects, including, to her astonishment, the very arts program that had transformed her Riverdale neighborhood. "That's impossible," she whispered, spreading photographs across her desk. The Riverdale Arts Collective had been funded by an anonymous benefactor. The neighborhood had speculated for years about their guardian angel, but no corporation had ever claimed credit. Yet, here was undeniable evidence. Westfield Advertising had designed the program's branding, created its promotional materials, and, according to a buried financial statement, provided its initial funding. More shocking still was the handwritten note attached to the project brief. "Personal directive of J.W. No public attribution requested. J.W. Julian Westfield." Olivia sat back, mind reeling. The program that had changed her life, that had introduced her to design and quite possibly set her on the path to Westfield Advertising, had been Julian's initiative, the same man who fired employees without remorse, who pushed his team to exhaustion, checking our historical sustainability messaging? Julian's voice startled her. He stood in her cubicle entrance, eyes immediately registering the scattered Riverdale documents. "You funded the Riverdale Arts Collective." It wasn't a question. Something unreadable crossed his features. "That was confidential. It was my neighborhood." The words hung between them. "That program is why I became a designer." Julian's composure faltered visibly. "Your neighborhood?" "The mural on Westfield Street, yes, ironically named long before your involvement, was my first exposure to design thinking. The community workshops were where I learned Adobe software. That program was everything to kids like me." Julian seemed genuinely shaken. "I didn't know you were from Riverdale." "Would it have mattered? Would you have treated me differently?" The questions emerged sharper than intended. "That's not—" He stopped, recalibrated. "My office, please. This isn't a conversation for Cubicle Row." Minutes later, Olivia stood in Julian's minimalist office as he closed the door. Through the glass walls, curious eyes watched their interaction. "The Riverdale initiative was personal," he began, unusually hesitant. "My grandfather grew up there before it declined. He documented the neighborhood through photography for decades. After he died, I wanted to—" He paused. "The area had potential. Creative potential being wasted through lack of opportunity. So you what? Decided to anonymously revitalize an entire neighborhood art scene?" "It wasn't altruism," he said sharply. "It was strategy. Investment in future creative talent." The anonymity was practical. Westfield doesn't do charity cases. But Olivia saw through the corporate justification. "You have his photographs. Your grandfather's." It wasn't a guess. On Julian's otherwise Spartan desk sat a single framed black and white photograph of Riverdale's historic water tower, taken from an angle only accessible from her old apartment building's roof. Julian followed her gaze to the photograph, then looked back at her with dawning recognition. "The scholarship recipients. 5 years ago. You were the girl who wrote you a thank you letter." Olivia's voice softened with the memory. "For the design fellowship that paid for my final year of college. You never responded." Something like regret crossed Julian's face. "The scholarship program was supposed to be anonymous, too. My father intervened, insisted on attaching the Westfield name for PR purposes. I couldn't—" He stopped. "It complicated things." "So you ignored 20 heartfelt letters from scholarship students?" "I read them all." The quiet admission hung in the air. "Your letter mentioned the Riverdale murals. That's why I remembered your application when it crossed my desk 3 years later." Olivia processed this revelation. "You knew who I was from the beginning. I knew you were talented and had benefited from the Riverdale program. I didn't connect that to the scholarship until later." "And you didn't think this was relevant information to share?" Julian's jaw tightened. "I hire based on talent, not sentimentality." "Right. Because admitting you once did something genuinely good would ruin your ruthless reputation." Anger and confusion tangled in her chest. "Why hide it? Why pretend to be this corporate machine when clearly there's more to you?" For a moment, she thought he might actually answer truthfully. Instead, his professional mask slipped back into place. "The luminous presentation is in 3 days. Let's focus on that, not ancient history." Olivia recognized the dismissal but stood her ground. The man who funded Riverdale Arts and the man who fires people for questioning his vision can't be the same person. "Which one are you, Julian?" He met her gaze, something vulnerable flickering behind his eyes. "Perhaps neither is the complete picture." As she turned to leave, Julian spoke again. "Olivia." The use of her first name stopped her. "The concepts you presented yesterday." The human element. That's what Luminous needs, what this agency needs. It wasn't an answer to her question, but somehow it felt like one anyway. Broken facades, the Rosewood presentation loomed 1 week away. Olivia and Julian had fallen into a routine of late nights at the office, ordering takeout and dissecting every element of the campaign. The dynamic between them had shifted. Professional still, but tinged with an understanding that hadn't existed before. "The storytelling needs to be more authentic," Julian said one evening, loosening his tie as they reviewed the pitch deck. "Rosewood isn't selling luxury. They're selling belonging." Olivia studied him as he stared at the presentation, his guard lowered after 14 hours of work. You understand that because you've never felt like you belonged anywhere. His head snapped up, eyes narrowed. Don't psychoanalyze me, Olivia. I'm not. She held his gaze. I'm recognizing something familiar. The silence stretched between them, taut with unspoken truths. My father, Julian finally said, voice low, measured worth in achievements. Nothing was ever enough. He gestured toward the skyline, visible through the windows. This agency was supposed to prove something to him. Instead, I've become him. Not entirely, Olivia countered. You kept that article about the community center. The real Julian Westfield cares about impact, not just profit. He pushed away from the table, pacing. The board doesn't want impact. They want growth, market share, expansion. Then why did you hire me? Olivia challenged. My portfolio wasn't about safe commercial work. You could have chosen someone more corporate. Julian stopped pacing, his expression unguarded for once. Because your work had soul. Because when you defended your design that day, I saw someone who wouldn't compromise their vision, someone I used to be. Olivia stood, crossing to where he stood. You still are that person. The funding for Bedford Heights wasn't a business decision. It was personal. I grew up 3 blocks from there, he admitted quietly, before my father's business took off. Before we moved to the right neighborhood with the right schools and the right connections. His voice held years of buried resentment. The arts saved me then. I thought maybe they could save others. They did, Olivia said. Me, Ethan. Dozens of kids who would never have found their voices. Julian's hand moved tentatively, his fingers brushing against hers. I never replied to your letter because my father's lawyers advised against personal involvement. Corporate philanthropy should remain impersonal, they said. And now? Now I regret listening to them. Olivia took his hand fully in hers. Then let's make Rosewood personal, real. Let's tell the truth about connection. They worked through the night, rebuilding the campaign around authentic stories, including their own. When dawn broke, they had created something neither could have developed alone. As Julian drove Olivia home, exhaustion mixed with a strange exhilaration. At her apartment building, he turned to her. Thank you, he said simply. For the campaign? For seeing me. His voice was rough with fatigue and emotion. Not many people do. Before she could respond, he leaned across the console and kissed her, tentatively at first, then with growing certainty when she responded. When they pulled apart, the professional boundaries they'd maintained for months had irrevocably shifted. The presentation is in 6 days, Olivia whispered. Forehead pressed to his. I know. Julian's thumb traced her cheekbone. We have decisions to make. As she watched him drive away, Olivia wondered if they'd just complicated everything, or if perhaps for the first time things were finally becoming clear. New canvas. The Rosewood presentation room hummed with anticipation. Board members from both companies filled the sleek conference table, with Julian at one end and the Rosewood CEO at the other. Olivia stood ready by the display screen, meeting Julian's eyes briefly before beginning. Their campaign wasn't like anything Westfield had produced before. It interwove luxury with authentic human connection, featuring real stories from travelers, staff, and communities surrounding Rosewood properties. The centerpiece was a narrative about how spaces transform lives, how belonging can be found in unexpected places with unexpected people. When Olivia finished, silence filled the room. The Rosewood CEO leaned forward. This isn't what I expected from Westfield, Julian stood. We're evolving. The market demands authenticity. It's risky, cautioned Westfield's finance director. The return on investment will exceed projections, Julian interrupted, because it will resonate on a deeper level than competitor campaigns. He moved to stand beside Olivia. Miss Pierce has introduced a new direction for Westfield, one I fully endorse. The meeting dissolved into technical questions, budget discussions, and implementation timelines. By its conclusion, Rosewood had signed with Westfield, contingent on Olivia leading the creative team. As executives filed out, Julian pulled Olivia into a side office. You did it, she said, relief and pride washing through her. We did it, he corrected. But there's something else we need to discuss. His expression grew serious. The board has concerns about our situation. Olivia's stomach dropped. Our situation? They've noticed the changes in my management style, the time we spend together. They're concerned about impropriety. And what did you tell them? She held her breath, waiting for him to retreat behind his corporate facade. Instead, Julian surprised her. I told them I'm recusing myself from directly evaluating your work, that Damon will oversee your projects and report to me. He stepped closer. And I told them that my personal life is not subject to board approval. Olivia blinked. That's very unlike the Julian Westfield I met 3 months ago. I'm not that person anymore. His voice softened. Or perhaps I'm finally becoming who I was before I built these walls. The board could make things difficult. They could, he acknowledged. But the Rosewood success buys us some leverage. She studied him, this complex man who had transformed from adversary to something much more complicated. This won't be easy. We're both stubborn, dedicated to our work, passionate, he added, a smile touching his lips. Creative, occasionally infuriating. And if it doesn't work? Julian considered this with characteristic thoughtfulness. Then we'll have created something valuable together, even if temporary. He took her hands in his. I've spent my career avoiding risk, Olivia. Playing it safe while pretending to be bold. I don't want to make that mistake with you. 2 months later, the Rosewood campaign launched to industry acclaim. Westfield Advertising began attracting a different caliber of talent, creatives who valued purpose alongside profit. Julian established a foundation to fund arts education in underserved communities. With Olivia designing its visual identity, their relationship evolved cautiously, both aware of professional complications and personal vulnerabilities. They disagreed often, Julian's strategic precision sometimes clashing with Olivia's intuitive creativity, but those tensions produced their best work. One evening, as they walked along the waterfront past the illuminated city skyline, Julian stopped and turned to Olivia. I've been thinking about Bedford Heights, he said. The community center needs renovation. I'd like to fund it properly this time with my name attached. Olivia smiled. Going public? In more ways than one. He reached into his pocket and produced a small velvet box. This isn't a proposal, not yet. It's a promise that I'm done hiding behind corporate facades and legal barriers. Inside was a simple silver key. To my home, he explained. A beginning. Olivia closed her fingers around the key, then reached up to trace the lines of his face, no longer the cold executive she'd first encountered, but a man still learning to balance ambition with vulnerability, control with connection. Julian Westfield, she said softly. Who would have thought that the man I once considered my nemesis would become my partner? Perhaps we recognized something in each other from the beginning, he suggested. Something we both needed. As they continued their walk, Olivia reflected on how differently things might have unfolded had she never discovered that newspaper clipping. Had Julian never acknowledged his past? Had they both remained behind their protective walls? Sometimes, she realized, the people we clash with most fiercely are the ones who see us most clearly, and in that recognition, despite all odds, something extraordinary can grow.